This is Cult Confessions with Christy and Josie. Welcome to our podcast.
Trigger warning. May contain themes of religious trauma and sexual abuse. Disclaimer. All information in this podcast is our opinion based on our experiences. We do not purport any of this content to be inherently factual and believe that each individual has the right to draw their own conclusion.
Hi, I'm Christy.
And I'm Josie. And today on Cult Confessions, we are going to be talking about a few things. So we've talked a lot about, just like offline, just the two of us talked a lot about David Baker and some of the things that he's been accused of recently, and the fact that he committed suicide right after being released, which is totally not an indicator of guilt in any way, shape, or form. So we're going to talk a little bit about through some of the things that we've found out about him. I also strongly suggest that if you have interest in this story, you check out the Preacher Boys podcast. Eric Skorzinski is the host over there. He's absolutely incredible, and he's got a lot to say about this subject, which, I mean, so do we. So, so I think just a little bit of history. David Baker is obviously like an IFB preacher. He had, I think you found out, work for Paul Chappell for a while, right, Christy?
Yes, it sounds like he worked for Pastor Chappell for years. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
He's also the vice president or president. We found a couple of conflicting information pieces out there of an IFB online college. He's also he runs a ministry, or ran a ministry, with David Hiles, which if you're familiar at all with Hyles Anderson College or the IFB, I mean, if you know about the IFB, you know about Hyles Anderson or David and Jack Hiles. David Hiles is not a good person. He's been accused of so many cases of rape and molestation, and he's not a good person. So they ran or run, I don't know if it's current or past dates, a ministry together called Fallen in Grace. And we're going to look at that website a little bit and show you guys some super great things that they have there. But basically that ministry is dedicated to pastors specifically who have fallen, which 9 times out of 10, if you are a pastor that has fallen, it's because you've committed some sort of like sexual atrocity. Either you cheated on your spouse, or you have been accused of rape or molestation of a child or an adult. There are several cases of both. But usually if you are a pastor that has fallen, that's the reason why, is because you couldn't keep it in your pants for something. So we'll talk a little bit about that website. So David Baker was accused of, and charged with aggravated sexual battery of a family member. Family member who was under 12 at the time. Don't know their exact age. After doing some research, we looked at, Tennessee state statutes and what constitutes aggravated sexual battery, and from what we can understand, this is very uncomfortable to talk about. It was touching a minor's breasts under her shirt, which I have no doubt that he did, given his actions after being charged. We also want to talk a little bit about how disgusting it is, the reaction of that, the college that he is like a founder or president, or he's in charge in some capacity there. They're defending him, obviously, super saddened by the loss of this great man, which is pretty gross. I'm not an advocate for suicide by any means, and I think that if you're somebody who's been accused of or has committed these crimes, I don't think you should kill yourself. I think you should let the justice system do what it does best. And I think you deserve to rot in jail, for sure, but I'm not an advocate for suicide in any way, shape, or form. So, yeah, I don't love that he killed himself. He needs to be held accountable for his actions, which is a little
Yeah.
disgusting that he's not doing that.
Well, it also makes me wonder what else he might have done since then because
Yeah, it might
this
just
was
be the tip
back
of the
in
iceberg.
like
2013 to
2015.
2015
Okay.
is
Yeah.
when the assault took place. Yeah. So,
Yeah. So
yeah,
we
this
were
guy's kind of
talking
a
about it.
POS.
And it kind of sounds like maybe the person that he was abusing, maybe they're recently an adult or something. That's kind of why they've
Yeah.
brought this back. Yeah, back up.
Well, that's
So,
yeah. There's a little bit of speculation there, maybe a little bit of just like logic,
mhm,
because the charge was for somebody who was under the age of 12, and it happened in 2013 to 2015, so about 10 years ago. So, assuming they were 10 to 12 when it happened, they're probably 20 to 22 right now, which I think is pretty common. I know that at least in my case and the case of other victims and survivors at the church that I went to, we're all adults now, and there was a lot that we didn't realize was actually done or actually wrong, until we left and started deconstructing and getting away from the IFB, getting away from these really toxic preachers and toxic churches, and really understanding like the full scope of what had actually happened to us. So that makes total sense to me.
yeah. Um,
So where do you want to start?
so I was kind of gonna read the Preacher Boys post about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, David Baker has been arrested for aggravated sexual assault against a minor. Baker is the pastor of Family Baptist Church in Tennessee and the president of Independent Baptist Online College, a very small unaccredited program. Made bond and is now facing serious allegations. He is also the former mayoral candidate for Maury County, which is the county that he lived in.
Mm-hmm.
He was arrested on September 10th, 2024 by the Maury County Sheriff's Department. I This is from Eric's perspective. He personally contacted the department this morning to confirm that the charge was aggravated sexual battery, and that he was checking in to see if it was in fact a minor that he had aggravated. The full extent of the abuse is not publicly known, but it appears that there are multiple victims involved.
Damn.
In the wake of Baker's arrest, I've made several attempts to get comment from his associated ministries. And it sounds like both the Independent Baptist Online College and Family Baptist Church just went straight to voicemail. And so that's kind of all he knew at that point.
And
Obviously,
that post was
he was,
made, what, 3 days ago? So, like the 11th?
yes. So
Yeah, so it was the day
obviously
after
he
the
was
arrest.
arrested and he had a bail amount, I think.
200,000.
Yes, he got out, apparently went
And
to the hospital.
immediately. Yeah. So I'm really confused on why the hospital, honestly. Like, I looked at a bunch of articles, and I,
I don't know.
I
It's
don't
weird
understand why
because
this
it's
man went to
like,
a hospital.
to me, I'm like thinking he obviously felt a lot of guilt and shame and stuff for what
I
he
would hope
did,
so.
only because he got caught, obviously,
Right.
um, and didn't want to face anyone because he's associated with a lot of people. It sounds like he
Right.
didn't really want to face them, and that's kind of why he decided to take his own life. But it's weird that he goes to a hospital to do it because it almost seems like, well, I guess if like it doesn't work out, then maybe they'll be able to save me. Like, what?
I don't, yeah,
What a
honestly,
weird
like,
thing.
which the hospital did attempt to resuscitate, obviously, when, like, the cold silver was called, and they found somebody in the bathroom with gunshot wounds. They did their job. Um, Obviously didn't work. I mean, he was
Yeah,
already
he
deceased when
he
he was
apparently
found.
went to a hospital and went into the bathroom, right?
Which,
And
and it specifically said in an article that I read that he did not seek treatment. So I don't know. I do not understand why this man went to a
yeah,
hospital
it's
unless it was some sort of like subconscious like effort that he didn't actually want to die. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of I don't know. It's such a weird that's like makes you question why. Yeah, super weird.
Yeah. So interesting. Okay, so this pastor also ran for mayor in, I believe it was 2022. Um and he filed a defamation suit against his opponent, um which I don't know, kind
I
of
wonder
sounds like
why,
he's
like,
just a sore loser. I haven't
what
looked
did he
super far
say?
into I haven't
Okay.
looked a lot into this defamation suit. I want to do more research onto this, but from what I understand, he accused his opponent of making statements that were knowingly untrue, which is the
Hmm.
legal definition of defamation. You're making a statement that you know to be untrue that is going to hurt somebody else. Um,
Hmm.
so he accused his opponent of doing that, which led to another person. I'm not sure exactly how they were related or associated, but that apparently led to another person committing suicide. So again, I don't know how much of that is true. I don't know how much of that is not true. Um,
Hmm.
but that's something he did.
Yeah, I was like looking up about him and then I found that he has a YouTube channel. Yeah, so it's FBP.
FBP.
Mm-hmm.
We might want to look at that and like, I don't know, just listen to some of his episodes and see what we can find. There is a very short clip of something he said in a sermon that I want to talk about today as well,
Oh yeah.
which we'll show that and we'll play that in a little bit. But it talks about how you aren't supposed to, like, kids aren't supposed to tell their parents about anything that the church faculty does, essentially, which is a very common theme in the IFB, unfortunately.
Yeah. Also, I saw that Preacher Boys Eric seemed to say that he had Pastor Wilkerson and one of the Hiles men on his podcast in 2022.
Oh,
Um, so we might want to
interesting.
look at those and maybe insert certain things
Yeah,
about those podcasts. But
because yeah, those
yeah,
are
it
both
seems
pastors
like
that have committed and or covered up pretty significant abuse.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've ever met David Baker. It could be a possibility. I don't know how long he's been in Tennessee. Um,
Well,
but
he's
it
been in
could be
Tennessee for a
possible
long
that
time,
yeah.
because he was a chaplain for, ironically, the jail that he was
Oh
housed
yeah.
at. That he was housed at. He was a chaplain for that jail for 28 years. So that's in Tennessee. I'm assuming he's been there at least that long.
Oh man. Maybe he didn't want to face like the people that he had been preaching
Yeah,
to. It's
yeah.
like, oh shit,
I
I have to
wouldn't.
go.
Yeah, dude, the hypocrisy. Ooh,
That would be
that's pretty bad.
awkward.
Yeah,
No, it seems like he kind of had his fingers in like a lot of ministries and stuff
yeah.
and uh definitely had a front of being this very holy, godly man.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I mean, your sins
Another
will
one
find
bites
you
the
out, I
dust.
guess.
I don't know, man.
Seriously.
So, okay, do you want to stream that video?
Yes, let me see.
We're gonna watch this this little clip of a sermon. This was back in 2023, I believe. Um, and yeah, just we'll play it and then we'll talk about it.
How easy is it for kids to tear down their parents? In the day in which we live, do they do that? Here's the word: all day long. All day long. We used to have it in the Christian school. The parent would come in and tell something bad that happened with their kid in school, and we'd say, look, we won't believe everything they tell us about you if you won't believe everything they tell you about us. And then the parent goes, what did they say? Yeah,
Jesus.
exactly. It's amazing how easy it is to tear down the authority, to tear down that person. Biblically, that's not how we're supposed to handle things. We'll talk about that.
I I just don't understand like the idea of like you being afraid of what the teachers would think of what you do at home.
Right. Right.
Like you should be a good loving parent and not be afraid of like your kids quote unquote snitching on you.
Well, and yeah, vice versa. Like, same for like teachers and faculty at a school. You shouldn't be acting in a way that makes you afraid for kids to go home and tell their parents what you were doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
it should be, and it should be a very like um open communication. Like I
yeah,
know with schools now they have like easy ways to communicate to the straight to the teachers and stuff like that. So it's like you should have a close relationship with the teachers and make
absolutely.
sure that your kid's not getting bullied or abused or anything like that. I think that
Yeah,
um it's like I don't know, like why would you not stand up for your kids and why would you like I guess recoil when like someone says, "Well, they told me this about you,"
right.
kind of thing.
It's putting kids in the middle of it unnecessarily, and it's again, it's like trying to control children, which is just
Hmm.
not, it's not okay. And that's so much of what
Yeah.
the IFB does, is just trying to control children. And I mean, we've talked about, our school rules. I mean, some of them are funny, we had to wear culottes and culottes are the worst, and all that kind
Hmm.
of stuff. Like, some of them are, we can laugh at, but honestly it all goes back to this attempt to control and suppress childhood.
Hmm.
Um and that's just disgusting, honestly, for a community and for a religious group that preaches have as many children as you possibly can, and children are a blessing, and blah 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 blah. But then to treat their children like this, and to not, you have to sit up straight in school, in church, you have to, fold your hands, you have to be quiet during a sermon, like you have to stifle creativity and questions and things like that. Like, for a community to treat children like that, honestly, it's really disgusting.
Yeah, and apparently this guy that says that his I hate what he said in the very beginning of like kids, what did he say? Um how easy it is for kids to tear down their parents.
Oh my god, to tear down the authority. Yeah, okay, so like,
And then he's like all day every day basically. Like
which, okay,
what?
so, and
And he has 11 kids
yeah,
apparently.
this man has 11 children. His poor wife. But honestly, like, children have authority over their parents. No. Parents have authority over their children. I said that wrong. I'm sorry. I'm so tired. Jesus Christ. Okay, let me start over.
Same. Same.
Parents have authority over their children. Um, Obviously, like, they are
Hmm.
children. They don't know anything. It is your job to teach them things. It is your job to raise them and protect them and guide them and make sure
Hmm.
that they come out of your house functional adults. Like, that's your job as a parent. You have that authority over your child. Um, just because your child questions you or disagrees with you, depending on their age, like, does not mean that they're undermining your authority. And I think that's a really, really big misconception in the IFB, is that, and I'll say this from the perspective of a rebel child, because that's what I was, according to the IFB. Like, I can't even tell you how many times I was told I was undermining my parents' authority, I was undermining my pastor's authority and God's authority in my life by asking questions and not agreeing with rules and being really angry that rules were being enforced on me that I didn't agree with. And
Hmm.
I was not undermining anybody's authority. I was just trying to figure shit out.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that conception is ridiculously false, and it's incredibly detrimental to children.
Yeah, I think that we've talked about it before, but just like Christianity kind of um keeping kids' natural curiosity from
Yeah.
flourishing and like
Yep.
not allowing that to be a thing. And I don't know, it's a super weird thing because they almost treat little kids like they need to act like adults and be very
No,
mature
they
and quiet
do.
and control themselves when kids they don't have a lot of control, like self-control.
No,
That's
dude, kids
part of
are
being a kid.
absolute crazy messes, and that's part
Hmm.
of the joy of childhood is that you can be an absolute crazy mess. Like,
Yeah.
you should be allowed to do that. And I'm not
Like
saying like,
maturity wise, they literally can't
yeah,
do those things or they
yep,
shouldn't be able to really.
yep,
And the fact that they're so afraid that they have to like be quiet during a church service or whatever, they have to listen to
yeah,
everything that you say to the point where they're basically just shells of themselves because they can't ever express themselves how they
yep,
want. Um, it's just really sad and yeah, I don't understand that type of parenting, but it's like it's such a weird thing because it's like you're an adult kind of thing, like be mature and be responsible, but then you're also not allowed to like do all these things that an adult would be allowed to do.
right,
Like with like going to college and you have to tell the college where you are at all times, even if you're over 18. Like
mm-hmm.
you're
You still have to
treated like an
follow a
adult, but
dress
then you're also
code.
not, yeah, you're
Yeah.
not really treated like an adult. It's such a weird
You have like adult
experience.
expectations without adult privileges, I feel like,
Yeah.
when you're a kid in the IFB. And I mean this goes young. Like as soon as you get out of the toddler nursery and you hit Sunday school, like and you're usually 4 years old when that happens.
Hmm.
Sometimes 5 depending on the kid and what the parent wants to do, but like 4 to 5 years old when you get out of the toddler nursery and you hit Sunday school, like you can't run around and play, you have no toys. You sit there, you listen and you learn, and that's your expectation during a church service.
Hmm.
And I mean like I understand like separating like Sunday school and junior church and things like that from the big service because kids are they need more stimulation, they need more attention, they need things like that. I still don't love that we're separating kids from their parents all the time,
Hmm.
but the expectation for the kids are the same in like big church. In the main church services, you sit there in a pew with your family, and it is expected for the parents to like whack the kid upside the head or slap them on the wrist if they are misbehaving
Yeah.
by,
I mean, a
running
lot of times
around.
like we would see kids being taken out by their parents
Yeah,
screaming
yeah,
because they were about to get spanked. Like
mm-hmm.
it's yeah. It's very much fear-driven parenting, which is sad. Like
It is.
I just don't agree with that and I would never parent that way, like
No,
ever. I think that
no,
would really break my children very quickly, like to do that. And
yeah.
I don't want to break them like they're little kids. I want them
They
to.
don't need to be broken. Like this
Mhm.
idea that a child needs to be broken is, which I mean have that's literally been said about children and the IFB. Like you need to break their spirits. They're like fucking horses. Like
Yeah.
you don't need to do that to a child. Um, each kid, each person is brought into this world with a very different personality, with different interests and different skills and talents, and the IFB just wants everybody to be exactly the same.
Yeah.
Um,
And then if you don't
and that's
fit in
not
that
good.
mold, like we didn't,
Yeah.
obviously,
Then
you
you're
get
some
kind
sort
of
of an
casted out.
apostate. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
shunned,
It's
you're
sad.
talked bad about,
Um,
you're treated so much differently.
I just, so it does make me wonder, like, obviously, all of this is speculation, but it does make me wonder what else maybe happened after this 2015 thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like there has to be more for him to have like committed suicide, if that makes sense. Like there's
Well,
a lot more that he's
yeah,
hiding.
I would think so. I think that Eric even said, I'm not sure if it was on a Facebook post or a video, but I remember reading or hearing him saying something about other cases.
Oh yeah, it says
Which
that there's other victims, so I'm
yeah.
curious if like maybe they decided to come together and kind of
Wait,
go
and
after him
even if
together.
they didn't come together, like I have so much love and awe for the one, the first one
Hmm.
that speaks up and the first one that says something and the first one that calls it out, because there's always more. There's
Yeah.
always more. Um, like for me, I spoke up and I'm saying these things publicly, and hopefully in the next couple weeks I'll be able to share more details of my story. But even in just having these conversations and saying things to people in our circle, the amount of conversations that I've had with other people that Daniel hurt, that I had no idea about, wouldn't have
Yeah.
had a clue if I never said anything.
Hmm.
So, yeah, honestly, like whoever this woman is, I love you and I'm proud of you, because that's so hard to do.
Yeah. And I think that I mean I hope that like our podcast gives people hope and strength and stuff to like
Right.
be able to come out, because it's scary, obviously,
Yeah.
and it's hard. It's such a hard thing to do. And um, the feeling of guilt that a victim has, it can last for a really long time. And I think people don't understand how hard it is to come forward, and also how hard it is to process like, oh, this wasn't right, or oh, this was abuse or whatever. Like,
Yep.
uh it's a really hard journey, and I just hope that with our podcast we're able to like platform people, obviously, and allow voices to be heard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm thankful for this person coming forward. I'm
Yeah.
sad to hear that he decided to off himself instead of allowing these children to feel some sort of justice.
Right.
Um, it's honestly just really messed up that he decided to do that. Um, Yeah, but the fact that he obviously had a lot of power. I mean, with all of the
Mm-hmm.
different ministries he had,
Yeah.
it just seems like he was involved in a lot of people's lives. And
Yeah. He had
if
a
this
lot
is
of
something he
influence.
did, yeah, if this is something he did in 2015, like maybe it was a one-time thing, but probably not. Let's be honest, probably not. Um,
So yeah, let's
so,
let's talk about some of those ministries. I want to talk about Fallen in Grace,
oh
because
yeah, go ahead.
I've heard about this ministry before, obviously knowing the Hiles, and that college and like the things that they're involved in. Um, so Fallen in Grace is a ministry of restoration. It's a ministry dedicated to specifically fallen preachers, but they also have some sections for fallen Christians or those affected by fallen preachers. So I
Mhm.
am very interested. I
So
okay, so I
are
want
they
to.
also like helping victims of these preachers?
I don't think so. I seriously doubt it. I want to look at this letter. So I'm going to read this letter. As soon as you go on their website and you look at the section for fallen preachers, it comes up with this letter, and I'm going to read it because I think it's stupid. So we're going to read it. It says, "Dear fallen preacher, I am writing this letter with a sincere desire to encourage your hurting heart. You poor thing, poor baby. For some time, you were involved in sinful activity, even while in ministry for Christ. The sin eventually overtook you, and your fall has been made known publicly to many. You have been disgraced. Most people will remember you for your sin and will forget the ministry part. No shit, Sherlock. Some will even say that you were a phony the entire time. Wonder why. I want to set that record straight and do my best to encourage your heart. The first paragraph. I mean, so many problems. Goes on to say, now I cannot know if you were genuine or not, but I do know that there is a biblical precedent for one who kept sinning even while he kept serving. We were given a glimpse of his life of sinful service. God allowed us to see his horrible failures and his amazing victories bundled together. He died in a condition that you may feel you are in now. People made fun of him, laughed at him, ridiculed him, discounted him, and in general abused him. But the good he did was not negated by God.
Yeah, but did Jesus sexually abuse people?
We're not talking about Jesus. We're not talking about Jesus. You may have already guessed that I'm referring to Samson, which is interesting because you could also put this on several other people of the Bible. When I first read this, I thought he was talking about David initially. It is interesting to note that God did not recount Samson's sins when he included him in Hebrews 11. He only spoke of his faith and the victories he experienced. You may live the rest of your life feeling your ministry has been negated by your sins. Some will certainly question the validity of your work, but the souls you won are still saved, the good was still done, and the victories were still won. Most importantly, God will not forget those things, even if others do.
Well, I could say the same thing about me.
Right?
Like,
okay,
as
but
an,
dude,
as
this
an
is
atheist now,
yeah.
all the souls that I brought to Christ, all the people I brought to
Yeah.
church, like they're
Yep.
still probably in church and still Christians and stuff, and I'm just not. But nobody cares about that part, right? Nobody
Well,
cares about the fact that we were believers at
God.
one point. It's
I
mostly
know.
just,
This is so stupid, though, because he's literally saying, yeah, you might have messed up a little bit, but everything is fine. You're fine. You're still a good person. Everything you did is still good, when in reality, you're a piece of shit. If
well,
you're
the crazy part is like literally someone like me that's an atheist or whatever that has left God, church,
Right.
whatever. I would be viewed worse as
Yes, you are.
a pastor that has sexually abused someone when it's like I haven't done any of those horrific things.
Nope.
And obviously, I think those things are wrong because I have morals and things like that.
Yep.
Um,
Outside of the church, even. Ooh.
yeah, but the fact that they're so easy to forgive these horrific acts and stuff, like in comparison to someone who has left the faith, rightfully so, you know, and say that a victim have they've left the faith or whatever, and then they accuse
Yeah.
the pastor. A lot of times they'll be like, oh, it's because, you know, they're angry with the church or whatever, and it's like, no.
Because they're not in God's word or any of that bullshit.
Yeah, it's like, no, pastors
No, it's
have a
because a
right,
crime
like,
was committed. It's because a crime
exactly.
was committed. And I'm sorry, there is such a difference, and this is something that the IFB gets really, really wrong. There is a really big black line between a mistake and a crime.
Yeah.
And when you you can make mistakes. People are allowed to make mistakes and grow and figure things out 100%. If you commit a crime, you need to be held accountable for that crime.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there's no line in the IFB, which is really, really problematic.
And especially because the majority of the time when it comes to any type of like religious group of any sort or whatever, anytime there is something horrible that happens, it usually is something sexual, like having to
Right.
do with some sort of sexual crime. It's not like these pastors are murdering, like serial killers or something. It's literal,
No.
they're sexual abusers.
Yep.
And it's insane because it's like, oh, there's all these people that are like worshiping God and saying to not have sex before marriage and that whatever, like lust shouldn't overcome you. But then here they are behind the scenes taking advantage of those that follow them, especially pastors, it seems like, are taking advantage of their, like, the community that they've created and everything, and the power dynamic that they have over
Yeah.
especially children, apparently. So it's disgusting and it's very hypocritical and um, make it make sense. Like, why are these men so easily fallen into temptation?
Honestly. So, okay, the rest of this letter. My pastor friend, you may spend the rest of your life paying for the sins that you committed. Samson certainly did. Samson ended
As you
his life.
should.
Exactly. Samson ended his life in horrible circumstances created by his own choices. Created by his own choices. That is a key word. Love that you said that, friendo. That is not how God portrays Samson. He allows us to see the last glimpses of his life not as tragic, but as victorious. The final word was given in the great book of Hebrews, where there is no talk of prison, no mention of chains, no reference to people making sport of him, and no talk of his eyes having been plucked out. What was recorded were the victories and the great things God did with him. Be encouraged, preacher friend. The end that people see is not the true end. There is an eternal final chapter that has been written about your life, and all the stinky parts that are being emphasized on earth
Wait,
have been
what?
removed.
You
It literally
stinky?
says all the stinky parts. It literally says all the stinky parts. I can't.
Oh God, so
Oh,
professional.
those good things that many have forgotten and even negated are the only ones that remain. One day you will stand before the Lord and he will read the final chapter of your life. My fallen preacher friend, it will be a glorious final chapter. Don't be dismayed. The end is not the end, but maybe the beginning to a whole new
So,
I feel gross.
so it doesn't really matter what you do.
Yeah.
Like any sins that you commit, it's fine as long as you do some work for God, which I've done. So, you know,
So then you're good. It doesn't
um,
matter that you're an atheist
yeah,
now.
it
That's
doesn't matter
totally
what I do.
irrelevant.
I can kill a bunch of people and I'm
Yeah,
fine, you know?
100%.
Um, so you just go to heaven and God's just like looking at your life and he sees these horrific things that you've done, especially to children.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well,
Nah,
the good
it's
outweighs the bad,
fine.
so it's
Yeah.
fine.
No, it
Although,
doesn't.
doesn't it say in the Bible like that sins committed against children are like the
Like the
worst?
worst of the worst. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's okay, so I don't know a ton of verses about it, but I know in Matthew 18 it says that if you offend a child, then a stone
Hmm.
should be hung around your neck and drowned, and you should be
Yeah.
drowned. So yeah, that's how that like that's the whole vibe of this ministry is. It doesn't matter what you've done. Everything's going to be fine. You don't have to take any accountability for your actions at all. Like, and it's just disgusting, honestly. Like when you are somebody, when you're a preacher, you have so much influence and you have so much power over people. And I have a problem with that, like structure anyway. But
Yeah.
when if you are a pastor of the IFB, you are given an incredible amount of power, and there's no
Mhm.
denying that. Um, when you use that power to do selfish, horrid things to other people, you need to be held accountable for that. And
Yeah.
it's just not the system. There is no accountability, which is really problematic.
Well, I mean, we've seen it over and over again of stories of pastors taking advantage of young girls and I I mean, they all seem like they trust the pastor, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
like he'll say like stuff like, you know, this is God's will, things like that, like crazy, insane things when it's like, it's literally just to allow his sin to happen
Yeah.
and to take advantage of these kids that look up to him and um, see him as this godly preacher and figure and everything. It's like, it's just really sad when things
Yeah.
happen like that. Um, but I think that everyone could agree to say that when it happens within a church, it just hits different, like the
Yeah.
fact that, you know, sexual abuse happens all the time, but the fact that it happens within a church and within these people that believe a certain rhetoric of like, you know, sex is a beautiful thing within marriage. Don't
Right.
cheat on your wife. Don't like all of these like insane views, rules, and standards. Like you're held to a higher standard, and it's because of your own doing, because you
Right.
believe this religion.
Right.
You have a higher standard for yourself and a higher standard than the world that you like
Mm-hmm.
to call it. So, yes, of course, it's going to be different and viewed differently when a pastor or whatever the fuck, a leader in the church
Yeah.
takes advantage and does these horrific acts. It's like everyone looks at it and sees these people do this and sees that you're hypocritical, and we want to believe that there's good in the world, and you want to believe that in a church you'd at least be safe from certain things happening to you,
Right.
but it's not true. And
No.
I think that's why we see it even worse than if it was done just in a regular institution, right? Like
Yeah.
because you believe these things, and
Yeah. No, and that's
it's
such a
just
good I had a really long conversation with my brother the other day, and he now I will preface with this with I love my brother very much. He and I disagree on just about everything. Um and we talked a lot about, well, why is it so bad in the church? Like, why are you so critical of the church? This is him asking me, like, why I'm so critical of the church. Um, and yeah, honestly, and I didn't think to say it because I was really angry at a lot of other things, and we talked about so many other things. But yeah,
Mhm.
honestly, yeah, the church is held to a higher standard. Preachers are held to a higher standard, and they do that to themselves. So that's
Mhm.
why it's so much worse. That's
Yeah.
why it's so much worse than if it happens anywhere else. Also, if it happens outside of that like religious organization, like okay, let's take public schools. If this happened at a public school and somebody knew about it, it would not be covered up. It would be
Yeah.
reported. People would be fired. People would be charged. Like the appropriate actions would be
Yes.
taken more times than not. And that's just not
Mhm.
what's happening in the church.
Yeah.
And which is a huge fucking problem. And but yeah, honestly, like you as a Christian, you preach a high standard of living. You preach that you have these incredible morals and that you have, the answer to everything of how to live a good godly life. Not perfect, but good and godly.
Mhm.
And so for you to sit there and to preach that and to say that, um and then, support, like even if you're not a person who's doing these things, if you're attending IFB churches that have done these things, if you're supporting giving money tithing to these churches that have done these things, um you're part of the problem, honestly.
Yeah.
Like your standard of living, your standard of morals is not as high as you think it is.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, it's like, yeah, I don't, follow church rules and
Mm-hmm.
biblical teachings anymore, but
Right.
that doesn't mean that I have zero morals or rules or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
you have to have some type of like what is it? Like you have to have some type of boundaries in life,
Yeah.
right? And like I think in
Some
general
rules.
society
You have to have
has,
some rules.
yes, there are rules. I mean, that's why there's a law, and that's why there's, like
Mm-hmm.
all these things laid out for us that we're not allowed to do.
Right.
Because I think as a society and as humans, we all believe that, killing is wrong and that abusing a child is wrong. Like we all can
Yeah.
agree on those things.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it doesn't mean that I'm just going around assaulting people. And the thing
No.
is, yeah, you guys hold yourself to a higher standard. You literally do.
Mm-hmm.
You profess this belief and profess that God has changed you and that
Yep.
God allows you to do all these things, and through God, you know, you speak these sermons and stuff like that, right? Like through the power of God.
Right.
But then it's like the power of God can't control you from doing all these horrific things. Like, it doesn't really make sense. And I don't believe in a God anymore or anything, but I'm not going around abusing children. And
Right.
I just don't get it.
There's
Like,
okay, so I know that this is like there. I've seen a clip of this. I think it was like Ricky Gervais talking about it in some show. I don't remember where, but I have been asked this by people who are still in the IFB, like, why don't you go around committing crimes and raping and murdering as much as you want to if you don't go to church and you don't believe in God? And the answer is I do. I do. I do that as much as I absolutely want to, and I don't fucking want to because I can have morals outside the church.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what you're taught in church, is that anyone in the world,
Yep.
they have no morals or anything.
Yep.
They don't live by God's word, and that they're just, I don't know, like ravaging cities and raping people.
Yeah.
And like, that doesn't happen.
No. No, it doesn't. I mean, not that it doesn't happen in, like, you know, smaller sects or like parts. You know, there are people in church, out of church, in whatever like community you want to look in, there are bad people, right? We know that. But it's not every single person that doesn't go to an IFB church is going to try to murder you or try to
Or
rape
just
you
the church
or
in
try
general.
to
Like,
convert you. Like, oh God.
it doesn't make sense to me that, I mean, obviously, you should probably look into it, you know, as a Christian. Like, why are all these pastors having these sexual sins and abusing their power?
Yeah.
Maybe, like, could it be because they have taken that power that God has given them as a pastor, like that they see themselves as this holy being that can kind of do no wrong and eventually fall, you know, like, it's also like when you talk about something all the time, like, I feel like I remember really whenever we were in church, it was like always talking about like sexual sins and
Yeah.
sexual desires and things like that, like all the time.
Yeah. Especially as teenagers.
Like, that's all that they talked about, is like sex. And I feel like it's probably not a good thing to be constantly surrounding
No.
yourself with, because I feel like it has made a lot of the people that we know more at risk to be sexual abusers, because that's all they
Yeah.
ever think about.
Yep.
Like, to be addicted to sex, because that's literally all you preach about
Yep.
is sex and
Yep.
sexual sins and things like that. And I don't know, it just makes you wonder, like, why does this happen? And why is it that when you have these high standards and stuff, that you still fall?
Because they don't actually have those standards. Like, they preach they do, but they don't actually exist. And I'm not saying every person in the IFB, because I know a lot of really good Christians. I know a lot of people in the IFB who are doing their best to live this biblical life, live up to these standards, and practice what they preach. Like, I know there are good people. I still feel very strongly that if you're going to an IFB church, especially one that has protected sexual predators or is not actively speaking out against sexual predators, that's still part of the problem. But I know that there are good people in these churches that are attempting to practice what they preach. But the issue, like, well, and I mean, we've talked about this, the IFB is inherently sexist. It places men ridiculously above women. like that's definitely part of the problem, because when you're giving men all of this power and women none of it, like you're teaching that men have a right to women, and they don't. That's not how the world actually is supposed to work. So
Oh
that's,
yeah, and
I mean,
women
that's a
don't have
big
any
part of the problem.
voice.
Exactly. That's a big part of the problem, is the sexism and the misogyny. Huge part of the issue. But yeah, honestly, I think it really is also, I think it also has a lot to do with the omnipotence of pastors. Like the pastor has an opinion on what car you buy. The pastor has an opinion on what house you buy. The pastor has an opinion and has to sign off in most churches on whatever you do with your life outside of the church. Like the amount of power and control that these pastors have over your life is absolutely ridiculous, and it's all encompassing. Like if you have a problem in your marriage, you go talk to your pastor. If you have a problem with anything, you go talk to your pastor. Like that, he is the go-to for every single thing all the time. And
Yeah.
they like to call it a burden. They like to call, the mantle of a pastor a burden, when it's not. It's an incredible privilege, to be granted that amount of power over so many people's lives. And when you have that much power and you have no checks and balances, that creates this environment where you can do whatever you want and get away
Yeah.
with it.
And justify it somehow.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, these pastors have been through countless like scholarly studies about the Bible. They've studied the Bible. They know the Bible so well. And most of them are masters of manipulation. Again, Pastor Boyle comes to mind. Like the way that man talks, he will make you think anything. Like he is not a fire and brimstone preacher. He is so soft spoken. But when he speaks, you listen and you believe. I don't know how to explain it. Like he has a way with words, and a lot of them do, and they're taught to have this. And you just believe. I don't know why, even if it's stupid. Like you just sit there and you believe because they logic it, and they can use the Bible and use scripture to be incredibly manipulative, and that's what they do.
And I think that pastors in general, we want to believe them. I mean,
We do.
they're supposedly men of God and were chosen by God, anointed by God, like
Yeah.
the whole everything. Like it really makes it so that we're supposed to just believe them, to respect them, to trust them and everything that
Yep.
they do, because they're our leaders, and they're godly men, the man of God, like
Literally, the man of
it.
God. That's their title.
And when you believe that, like as a Christian, when you believe that, obviously you're going to believe everything the pastor has to say. Like
Right.
everything, all of his counsel, everything, it comes
Yep.
from God, and he knows
Yep.
better because he is the man of God. Like it is to a point where you can't really discern on your own, like what is right and what isn't when it comes to what the pastor says, because
Yep.
you believe that what he's speaking is from God himself. So,
Yeah, I think especially when you're born into it, because like we talked about their treatment of children, like your critical thinking skills as a child are not nurtured, not developed,
yeah.
not allowed. So especially when you're born into it, and like when you've been raised with this ideology and you've been raised not to think for yourself, like what else are you going to do? What else are you going to believe? This is the truth as you know it. Like
Yeah.
there's every reason to believe this. And that's why I honestly, I have a lot of sympathy for people, good people, for those good people that I know that are still in the IFB, because what else are they supposed to believe?
Mhm.
When they've been in it for so long. Honestly, I think about my parents. Like, my dad wasn't converted until he was 22, but my mom was raised IFB, and I have a lot of anger towards them for some things, but I also have a lot of sympathy and I have a lot of empathy because I know how hard it is to leave. And
Yeah.
because, like, when you have this strongly held belief that is the core of who you are for so long, breaking that is, it's an astronomical feat, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, my parents have been at Faith Baptist for almost 20 years now. In 2 years, it'll be 20 years since they joined. And I am not happy that they still go there at all. It's not my life, not my decision. But I I have a lot of sympathy, even though I also have a lot of anger. I have a lot of sympathy for the people who are still in that situation because it's really, 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 really hard to do that.
Mhm. It's really hard to leave something that you've had your entire life.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of people do see it as community and stuff. So once you leave that community, you kind of lose all your friends, all your support.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of times your family, you
Yep.
know, having to face all of that is really hard. I know that we had a hard time with like, I don't know, when we left church, we were like in between churches, right? So we went to Lancaster Baptist and then we moved to Spokane and we went to Faith Baptist for like a couple church services, but
Yeah.
we never joined or anything. They wanted us to, but we just didn't feel, I don't know, faith just
It
it just
sucks.
didn't feel, yeah, it didn't feel like the church for us.
Yeah. It's
Um
icky.
and I don't know, it's hard to leave something like that because even with us, like for the longest time we never spoke on it. You know, we never were outspoken about leaving the church or leaving our
Right.
beliefs or not being Christian or any of that. Like,
Yeah.
we follow a lot of our friends from college and a lot of our Christian friends and stuff like that. And I think slowly, obviously, they've probably seen things that we believe now or whatever and have slowly unfriended us.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I
And
lost a lot of friends when I started the podcast. Not gonna lie, like there I've noticed
oh yeah,
so many. Which
uh,
I think it's interesting because like I don't really notice it like automatically, but sometimes I'll be scrolling and be like, that person reminds me of this person. I haven't seen anything from this person for a while. I'll go look them up. Oh nope, no longer friends. All right, that's cool.
yeah, yeah. It's something. I mean, I think it's really hard. It's really hard leaving. It's really hard
Yeah.
to feel the judgment of people. And I feel like people just kind of assume the worst of you when you leave.
Oh
And
yeah. I literally
um,
I had people tell, okay, so after I had officially left the church, I was still close to my old volleyball coach.
mhm,
And she's one of like two or three people that still kept in contact with me when I left. And I was over and she was talking about volleyball and how she was like stressed with practices and stuff. And I said, oh, well, if you want, I can come and help you out with a practice or something. And apparently, some people who had girls in volleyball told her that if I was allowed anywhere near their children, they'd take them out of volleyball.
what?
Yeah. So I'm
Jeez.
that bad. Yep. Dude, and that was like a year after I left. Probably
Hmm.
not even, and that has stuck with me for so long.
Yeah.
Just like that hate and that misconception, honestly, that I'm now a terrible person just because I'm not attending a church that hurt me so deeply. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't get it. I don't understand like how you just like turn on people so quickly. Like
Well, because if you don't, then you'll be the one turned on.
it doesn't make any sense to me, and it goes back to the whole idea of like what you believe when you're like looking at the Bible and looking at the way that Jesus
Mm-hmm.
acted towards sinners. And
Right.
then the first thing you do when someone leaves or someone believes something differently is to shun them or
Which is not what
to
Jesus
call
did.
them evil or whatever. And it's like, that's not that's not real. Like that's not the
No, it's
truth.
not
And
Christian. It's really not Christian behavior. If you look at the actual, like, and we've talked about this, like, Christian means little Christ. Like, if you
Mhm.
look at the behavior of Jesus towards people that he didn't agree with, you're not acting that way,
Yeah.
like, at all. It's so different. And I honestly,
Plus,
I don't understand how they,
honestly,
like,
it just seems like
balance that.
I don't know, like you'd have a better chance of reaching people if you were more accepting and more loving and
Yeah.
sharing love uh and understanding, instead of spewing hate. I think that's the hardest part about a lot of beliefs where it's like when you divide, right?
Yeah.
Like when you divide communities, when you divide families, when you divide like because of hate,
Mm-hmm.
especially, it's like that's something I want no part in.
Right.
Um, I I would rather have, nothing, no beliefs at all than to be a part of such hate, and like
Yeah.
and judgment. Like everybody has their issues. Everybody has whatever. Like we're all human, and I think that's a thing that you forget is that we are all human and we all have our issues and sins, if you want to call them sins, whatever, that we have to deal with, right? But like we move on, we work harder, we try better, and that's all you can really do. But like I think churches just make it so extreme, and I don't know. I didn't really want to live in that type of lifestyle anymore. I didn't
No.
want to uh feel the anxiety I felt when going to church and stuff and feeling like I had to be perfect at all times, and
Mm-hmm.
even then I wasn't enough. And I don't really care that I wasn't enough, honestly. It's more I think that I don't know, like I just the feeling of having to feel like I needed to be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
Um, it was just really nice when I didn't have to feel that way anymore. And like, I don't know, it's been a journey of like a lot of self-love, I think, and self-acceptance post church.
Yeah.
And sadly, church doesn't really teach that. It teaches, self-hate and that,
Yeah,
you're
it teaches
a
that you
sinner.
can't trust yourself and like,
Yeah, you're a sinner. Like you shouldn't trust your inner like
trust your heart because the Bible
instincts.
says that the
Yeah.
heart is deceitful and wicked and like and so like all of that kind of stuff like even now as soon as I see like I'll see like a little inspirational quote or a meme or something that says something about trusting your heart, follow your heart, and my first reaction is like nope, can't do that.
Yeah.
Because that's everything that the church says. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, it's hard to unlearn a lot of these things, and I think that
Yeah.
um yeah, I mean Nathan and I very much cold turkeyed the whole church thing.
Yeah.
So um that's kind of how we process things, but it's hard, and I think a lot of times people do like slowly like leave, as in, they start going to a less conservative church or
Right.
whatever, right? And we thought about it. We thought about going to like a less insane church, but it just never felt right for us. And
Yeah.
obviously we decided to have kids, and that was a whole thing. And then it was a girl, and I'm like, there's no way we're ever going to church.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yup, I don't
but
blame you.
I just think that it's really sad when things like this happen within the church. And the reason why is because of those standards, and those standards that were placed on them by
Yep.
themselves, by their beliefs, by their own
Yep.
beliefs, by their own Bible and everything. And yeah, I think that that's why we hold you to a higher standard when it comes to abuse and
Absolutely.
things like that.
Because you
And
hold
it's,
yourself to a higher standard.
yeah.
Like, if you
And
don't
we,
want to be held
yeah,
to that
like
standard, don't hold that standard for yourself.
we expect better of you because
Hmm.
that's what you expect of yourself.
And
And
the thing is, like, even judging by our low standards comparatively to the church, they still don't meet those. Like,
mhm,
so it's not even the fact that we have high standards for them, because we do, and we expect people to hold them. Like, I expect as a person, if you I don't like hypocrisy. Like,
mhm,
you're allowed to make mistakes, you're allowed to fuck up as long as you take ownership of it. But if you preach something, you should practice it as much as you possibly
yeah,
can. So I have a big problem with that. But it's not even that their standards are like too high, because because like according to the church, I have very low standards for myself, and according to the church, you have very low standards for yourself.
mhm,
And they're not even meeting those. So
yeah,
it's not a matter of, oh, their standards are so high and we're just, being too critical. Whatever. No,
yeah,
it's not. They're just not good.
yeah. I think that it's pretty easy to be a good person.
Yeah,
It's pretty easy to be
at least in my
kind
experience.
and like empathetic, understanding. It's pretty easy to not sexually abuse kids. Usually, yeah, pretty easy.
Yep. I mean, I don't know. No, honestly, it is so easy.
It's
It's
like,
so easy to.
is it easy? Yes, it's easy.
It's
God,
really easy, you idiots.
what do you
It's.
mean?
Oh my god, and it's really hard
What,
because,
one
like,
of the things I never understand either is like, okay, if you have sexual needs, then like go get them dealt with like in a legal manner.
in a
God,
legal way, yes.
right? Like, why do
Yeah.
you have to? Why? Oh,
Yeah. Oh, dude, that's a whole separate thing. Like, oh my god.
hmm.
I don't know how much I want to go into that. Oh my god. Okay, so I will just say very briefly, like, okay, so Theo and I are not legally married. We've been together for 8 years. We just haven't signed the papers. Like, I call him my
Hmm.
husband. He calls me his wife. Like, for all intents and purposes, we are married.
Hmm.
Um, we have only had sex with each other.
Hmm.
How do I want to say this? Sometimes, for some people, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
um, I'm good.
If you have a sexual need or want or whatever, there's a way to go about it in a
Right.
legal manner, in
By
a
not taking it out on children and not
mature
forcing it on
adult
people.
manner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's where a lot of Christians miss the mark. It's like
Yeah.
I say it all the time with like the person that touched me inappropriately,
Right.
which he was the pastor's son. And I'm like, I had a big crush on this guy.
Yeah.
So had he asked, it would have been such a different story.
Right.
But you don't know how to ask. You don't know how to ask consent. You're not
Yep.
taught consent.
Nope.
You're just taught to get married and do whatever you want with that woman because she's
Yep.
um and you're not taught to do things in the right way, in the
Mm-mm.
sense of like, if you are having these needs and you do need a healthy outlet, these are the options. Instead, you're
Yeah.
told, don't do it ever at all. don't do sex, period.
Don't do
And
sex.
and then it's like turned into this horrible thing because
Yeah.
you're just taught abstinence, and that's not realistic for some people. Like, it's
No.
just not. And it gets turned into something awful because they decide to touch people without asking, you
Mm-hmm.
know, do all these sexual like just horrific
Yeah,
things.
if sex wasn't so criminalized in the IFB and it wasn't so demonized, I think that there would be a lot less of this.
Oh yeah,
Because I
100%.
think that if
It's like
somebody,
it's like you don't want to be found out that you have these sexual needs, so then you like
right,
go about it in a horrible manner
right,
of sexually abusing someone when it's
yep,
like I'm pretty sure there's people that would want to do stuff with you,
yeah, like if you just
like if you
ask,
ask. Yeah,
yeah,
like
as
it's
long as,
not that
yeah,
hard.
honestly, it's
Yeah.
really not, and
I mean, I know
no,
I dated and did stuff with people and it was all consensual. So,
yeah, I had one
there's that.
boyfriend. I had one boyfriend before Theo, and we did not have sex. It was not going to happen.
Mhm.
I'm very glad that we didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
But like,
we both are we were both virgins until our partners.
yes, yes,
We
yes.
have only had our one partners.
Only one,
So,
and I'm happy with that. But honestly, like if it wasn't so criminalized in the IFB, like if you have those needs, if you have those desires, and you're able to explore them in a healthy way, I think that's such
mhm.
an important part of growing up. It's such an important part of figuring out what you want and what you need in a partner because,
Yeah.
like, I think that I am incredibly lucky.
Mhm.
Not that Theo is perfect by any means, but I honestly, I feel incredibly lucky that this is the man that I was my first everything. Well, not everything, but most
Mhm.
things. Um, but
Yeah.
like I feel very lucky because if he was not a good person, if he was a shithead, like my life would have turned out so differently. And all
Mhm.
of those first things, all of those really important things for me would not have been healthy. They would not have been
Yeah.
good. So I feel really lucky. And I also know that I am absolutely the exception to the rule in
Mhm.
that type of situation because so many women, either you get married and your husband is your first everything and you did everything right and then you end up getting maritally raped or you're not able to have an orgasm or it's
Mhm.
just terrible. There are so many things that can go wrong. And not that we haven't had struggles and not that there haven't been times where it's been hard because there absolutely has, but I
Yeah.
know that I am the exception to the rule there and I'm very, very lucky that I
Mhm.
have the partner that I do.
And that's something it's like, yeah, we're taught a lot of abstinence and we're not taught really obviously anything productive and helpful.
No.
Um, Women aren't taught about orgasms, I would say.
No,
No.
dude. Okay, so I
Like
think I
you're
talked
not
about
taught
that.
any of that
No,
stuff at
okay.
all.
So we might take this out because it's a little personal. I did not know what an orgasm was until I had one. I didn't know that
Mhm.
that was possible. Um,
Mhm.
I had no idea,
Well, yeah,
and
and like
I'll
in the marriage books, it's always from the perspective of the man. It's never from
right,
the woman. And
right.
maybe there's some out there that talk about it, but honestly, I don't know if
So
there
I
is.
strongly recommend. She was actually a guest recently on the Preacher Boys podcast, and I've talked about her in a previous episode. Sheila Gregoire. She is absolutely incredible. She's still a Christian, but she talks a lot about the dangerous teachings of sex in evangelical churches, and
Mhm.
she's written 2 books about it, both of which are amazing. If you haven't read them, would strongly recommend. But like the orgasm gap is a big thing between men and
Mhm.
women,
Yeah.
and men who constantly complain, oh, I don't have sex enough, I don't have sex enough, they're just stupid because they're not looking at the reasons why they don't
Yeah.
have sex enough. Because yeah, frequency is definitely a problem, but it's very rarely just a frequency issue. There's so many like bits and pieces behind that.
Mhm.
but I forgot where I was going with that. I got on a tangent. What were we talking about? I'm sorry.
I think orgasms, but
Orgasms. Yes. Okay. So I was gonna say, most of what I know about sex came from Theo. And again, I feel very lucky that he is the person that he is because he was so kind and he was so understanding and he was a little incredulous that I really didn't know this much. But he was so sweet and he talked through so many things. And honestly, it was really good for our relationship because we started talking about sex and all of those things before it even happened. So, and that was a really, really awesome experience for me because I had education at that point. I had understanding of what was going on. I knew what to expect. And it was just so different from what it could have been. And I'm so grateful, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't get that, especially
No.
within the Christian realm. I think
No.
men are very much in it for what can you do for me? You know, very easily impregnating women without them ever
Understanding that that's going to happen. Yeah.
Well, and also without them ever having any type of pleasure in the transaction. Like, it's like,
In the transaction.
do you know what I mean? Like, it's like
Yeah.
11 kids popped out, but have you ever orgasmed?
Like, okay, can I say, and again, like, I know that this is very personal, so I'm gonna make sure it's okay with you if we keep it in. But like, I have had so many more orgasms than he has in our relationship. I always come first. Always. He never has. Like, even in the very beginning, and I was his first too, and I think that says a lot. Like, there has never been a time where I haven't come first, ever. And that's great for me. I love that.
Yeah, I think that's good for you because I think it's always the other way around.
Rare. It's so rare.
Like
and we literally have these conversations like how, we talk about how men can't find the and he's like, I don't understand that. It's right there. Like, just touch it. Like, it's right there. So stupid. I love him so much.
Yeah, no, I think that it's
I'm very lucky.
It's usually the other way around where it's honestly, like, how long can you last kind of thing. It's like a couple seconds and then it's like, okay, cool.
So it's, I don't know.
I think it's
like,
I think that it honestly just depends on the person that you are and the person that you're with and everything. But I think the biggest thing is obviously a what if. And like, even then, it's like, you don't even know.
Because, see, for me, my what if is all bad. I think because I have everything that I want and need in a partner sexually. Like, my what if is like, what if I didn't get this? Like, what if this wasn't my first experience? What if it was really shitty?
Bad, yeah.
So, all of my what ifs are just, they don't come close to what I have in the
I mean, I
person that
honestly
love.
know a lot of people that have, like, open marriages, especially post-religion, where it's just like, if you kind of want to experience other things, you can.
I could never.
I know.
I could never. I mean, no shame on anybody who feels like that's what they need, but I could never.
But yeah, I think that that's very common just because it's like, they don't know what they're doing, obviously. No. Like, they're not taught.
But they also don't care to learn, and that's a big problem. Again,
well, a lot of them really aren't taught any of that, and the fact that women can have, like, find pleasure in it also. It's very much, obviously, based on a lot of the books that we've read, it's very male perspective, and like,
it very much is,
how to please a man, not really how to please a woman. And obviously, if you can't please your woman, she's not going to want to have sex with you very much. And it's not very fun for her or anything like that. So it's like, obviously not going to happen very much. And then, you know, they blame the wife for a lot of the sins of the man. So, like, if he goes and has sexual relations with anything else other than his wife, it's his
Yep.
wife's fault for not
Yep.
putting
Taking
out
care of
enough
his
or whatever.
needs.
And
Yeah, but
it's
then
all
if she does
bullshit.
it, she's a slut.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, yeah, if you cheat on your spouse, you're kind of a whore, and I don't like you. To be fully honest, like I don't.
I
have
mean,
a lot
there's
of,
a way to, yeah, there's a way to do, like, you know, if you're not
you can
happy,
like, well, and I mean, like, an
you
open
can leave.
relationship is not cheating if it's like, if it's consensual. Like, there are ways to talk about those things and make it work. But if you go and cheat, I don't think that you're a good person. I don't like you. Sorry,
Yeah, I'm always
homie.
like, I'm always just confused because it's like if you feel all these things and you're feeling yourself not in love with your partner anymore and in
Yeah.
love with someone else, like maybe end it before things get messy. Like,
Yeah.
be honest with your partner and
Yeah.
leave the situation honorably rather than,
And get some therapy. Get some
Yeah.
therapy. Anyhow,
thank you for watching. I know it's a really hard subject to talk about, and
Yeah.
it's disappointing for everyone, I feel, in this case. And so, yeah, I hope that you guys kind of understand where we're coming from and that you kind of enjoyed this video, even though it was
or at
a
least
hard
found some
topic.
value.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So please like, subscribe, turn on the bell notification so that you
buttons.
get notified when we put up any videos. And leave a comment down below. Like leave
please.
an emoji or something. But yeah, thank you for
That's
watching.
it. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Share your story.
If you have been affected by religious trauma or abuse, we want to hear your story.
Even if you're not ready to share publicly, we would be happy to listen and support you on your journey, free of judgment or pressure.
Please email us at cultconfessionskjv@gmail.com to get started.
We believe you.